Rishi Sunak is out and Starmer is in UK elections. It's a landslide victory. Jamaica jolted due to Hurricane Beryl. Good morning and happy Independence Day for Americans. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Budnam. I am thankful to all international news resources and my team. Following other news which have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian, Canadian channels and AP, AFP and Reuters news agencies. Now the headlines. Federal representative requiring votes in Canada. Pews and politics. A Holocaust survivor tracing her roots. Biden wants to continue its race. Last term Supreme Court decision in US. Israel sending a delegation for ceasefire talks. Hezbollah attack Israel with hundreds of missiles and drones. Russian president refused ceasefire talks with Ukraine. Russian court sentenced American doping and Chinese swimmers. People celebrated 4th July Independence Day in heat and rain in America. Iranian elections.
The UK keeping calm and kicking the Conservatives to the curb this Thursday night. The snap election call that backfired, putting the Labour Party back in power in a landslide.
I think it's time for change.
Hurricane Beryl jolts Jamaica, how it crashed a Canadian couple's honeymoon.
It was an emotional roller coaster.
And where the storm is barreling next. Pews and politics.
Praise the Lord. Where do you stand? Hallelujah.
Where the federal Conservative leader is vying for votes. And retracing her roots.
It's not the project of my life.
How a Holocaust survivor's tenacious daughter found the family she never knew she had.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There's a big political shift underway in the UK tonight. Exit polls released after voting ended predict a Labour Party landslide, putting an end to 14 years of Conservative rule. It was Prime Minister Rishi Sunak who gambled when he called this snap election, and after a lackluster campaign, he has lost. It's not clear he'll even win his own seat. It's now early Friday morning in the UK. The votes are still being counted, but it appears Keir Starmer, leader of the centre-left Labour Party, will be the next Prime Minister and has won a huge majority. And the Conservatives, well, predictions are this could be one of the worst results in their party's history. Our Europe Bureau Chief Crystal Gamansing is in London tonight. Crystal, how seismic a shift is this?
Donna, we are
London, thanks. Hurricane Beryl is now headed for Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula after barreling through the Cayman Islands, and people in Jamaica are trying to cope with what hit them. The hurricane's eyewall skirted Jamaica's southern coast as a Category 4 storm, ripping off roofs, knocking out power, causing widespread flooding. At least 2 people were killed. There has never been this powerful a hurricane this early in the season. It has now been downgraded to a Category 2 storm, but Mexico is preparing for the worst, and as Dan Spector reports, thousands of Jamaicans have been left with nothing.
Oh, God.
Residents of Jamaica's St. Elizabeth Parish spent... Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
About 30,000 Californians are out of their homes, nervously watching wildfires. The Thompson Fire, 100 kilometers north of Sacramento, is still just 7% contained. Fire crews are putting out hotspots in and around the city of Oroville, where fleeing wildfires is now becoming routine. They have threatened the town 3 of the last 4 years. Extreme heat is again baking California this week. 4th of July celebrations, including fireworks, have been canceled so emergency crews can focus on the fire. The federal government has quietly moved ahead with its promise to enact a digital tax. It's meant to ensure tech giants such as Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Spotify pay their fair share of taxes in Canada on revenue they earn here without having a physical presence. The American government is already threatening retaliation, though. Mackenzie Gray explains the new tax and why it's controversial.
It's the latest liberal tax that's estimated to bring in $7 billion on the backs of top tech giants.
Some of the large multinational companies, especially tech companies, don't pay their fair share of taxes. Now, they're subject to taxes like any other company.
Here's how it works and could impact you.
Boss in Toronto. What did she say?
Well, it's not the barbecue that Chrystia Freeland was probably hoping to have this summer, Donna. Freeland hosted Toronto area Liberal MPs in her backyard, a group reeling from losing a seat the party held for 30 years.
That message was, things are hard. Life is really challenging right now. And you, our government, need to do a better job.
That's the same kind of talking points Justin Trudeau and every minister has said so far, but no concrete examples on what could tangibly change, and not even a commitment to a full caucus meeting that 9 Liberal backbench MPs have asked for.
You win some and you lose some, but you come together at the locker room and figure out a game plan moving forward. And so I just had expressed that I thought it was a good idea to bring our colleagues together and have that conversation.
Trudeau and the rest of cabinet might be resisting that wider conversation, Donna, because of what some in caucus might ask for, including potentially replacing Freeland as finance minister to send a new message to Canadians on the cost of living crisis.
All right, Mackenzie in Ottawa, thanks. The federal Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, who hopes to be Canada's next Prime Minister, is doing all he can to win over voters long before an election call. That includes visiting evangelical Christian churches and giving campaign-style speeches. He's dropped into churches in Toronto area ridings now held by Liberals. Evangelical Christians don't play as active a role in politics here as they do in the U.S., but as David Aiken reports, it is clear the Conservatives are courting their votes.
The Honourable Pierre Poilievre. Praise the Lord. What do you stand?
Aiken in Ottawa, thank you. HBC has reportedly reached a deal to buy high-end American retailer Neiman Marcus. The Wall Street Journal and New York Times say HBC will pay $2.65 billion US to buy Neiman Marcus. It filed for bankruptcy during the pandemic, but still has 36 locations across the U.S. An investigation into why a whale went off course. Coming up, the humpback that got stuck in a Nova Scotia river.
He is the #1 ranked eater in Canada.
There is a claim to fame. It's Independence Day in the U.S., but Canada made history this 4th of July. Darian Thomas from Orillia, Ontario, is the second Canadian to compete in Nathan's hot dog eating contest. He downed 28 dogs in 10 minutes and finished 11th. The big winner, Patrick Bertoletti, somehow managed 58 hot dogs, and Mickey Sudo set a record for the women, eating 51 dogs. In Nova Scotia, work is underway to figure out what caused a humpback whale to become stranded on a sandbar in the Shubenacadie River. Seeing a whale in that shallow tidal waterway is rare, but this is the second one spotted in the river this month, and sadly, it did not survive. Heidi Petracek explains what happened.
It's an unusual and unfortunate sight, a dead humpback whale in Nova Scotia's Shubenacadie River.
It's definitely not their area. It's very shallow waters. Very hard for them to move around and figure out where to go.
The rarity of it is attracting onlookers. As marine animal experts try to get closer to understand just what happened.
And this animal's 11 meters and probably weighs 19 to 20 tons, so you can't just pick it up.
The adult humpback was first spotted on Monday, stuck but alive. This river raft tour operator got a call about the sighting and went out to find it, and members of the Marine Animal Response Society arrived to help.
We just had buckets of water and would keep them wet and try to keep them comfortable.
The Shubenacadie River drains into the Minas Basin, which forms the eastern part of the Bay of Fundy, a feeding ground for humpbacks. Every 12 hours, the 72-kilometer tidal river transforms from shallow sandbars to more than 3 meters or 11 feet of water. Last month, a minke whale also found itself stranded in the Shubenacadie, but seemed to find its way out at high tide. The hope was the same would happen here. Instead, the humpback was found dead Tuesday, further up the river system.
This is now the second one in only a month, so we're not sure if it's just purely they're following fish, or if it's a sign of something changing. Hopefully not, because these, again, are really hard places to work in to help them.
These steep, muddy banks and the tides also make recovery challenging. If they can't get the remains out, the whale might have to be left to Mother Nature. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Stewiacke, Nova Scotia.
Italy's Mount Etna erupts ahead. Europe's most active volcano wakes up. This is Mount Etna in Italy. It's Europe's most active volcano, and it is again putting on a spectacular show. The eruption left tourists who gathered close by in awe. The last time this crater on Etna's summit erupted was in February 2021. The European Space Agency says the volcano in Sicily is in an almost constant state of activity. Israel has agreed to renewed talks about a ceasefire and the release of hostages held in Gaza, and says it will send a delegation to meet with Hamas in Qatar. It will be the first meeting between the two groups since talks in Cairo broke down in early May. And in the occupied West Bank, Israel's government has approved more than 5,000 new housing units in a series of illegal settlements. And according to Peace Now, an Israeli settlement watchdog, it has also recognized 3 new settlement outposts in the Palestinian territory. The group calls it the largest West Bank land seizure in more than 3 decades, and it threatens the formation of a future Palestinian state. In northern Israel, the IDF says a reservist officer was killed in the Golan Heights after Hezbollah retaliated for the killing of a senior commander on Wednesday. The Iran-backed militant group says it fired about 200 rockets and 20 drones into Israel. In Beirut, hundreds gathered for the funeral of Mohammed Nasser tonight, one of the most senior Hezbollah commanders to be killed by Israel since the conflict began. Family reunion next, how the daughter of a Holocaust survivor completed her lifelong mission. A retired Toronto teacher has been on a decades-long mission to find out who she is. Alana Millman was born in a displaced persons camp for refugees in Germany after the Second World War. And as Karen Lieberman explains, she has finally found a long-lost piece of her identity.
Here's me as a baby.
Alana Millman was born in Germany and grew up in Israel before moving to Toronto, never having known where she really came from.
It's not just a kind of a phrase to say, you need to know where you came from and where you are going to. This was my motto.
It was also her lifelong mission. As a child, Millman learned she'd been adopted, but it wasn't until she was in her 30s that she found her birth mother, a Holocaust survivor, and later tracked her down in Montreal along with half-siblings.
My mother was a survivor from Ghetto Warsaw, and she managed to hide herself with fake ID for the rest of the war.
Millman published her autobiography in Israel, but it was missing a key piece of her life's puzzle.
She never told me who was my father The only thing that she told me is that he was a very good singer and a dancer.
When we heard about Ilana's family story and the fact
The team at genealogy platform MyHeritage stepped in to help. It started with a DNA test.
several things happened in this research that only a perfect combination of all of them together could have made it successful. We have access to many sources of information on MyHeritage, a good intuition, and of course luck. And apparently when you do things for a good cause, luck is on your side.
Millman's father was found, and although he had long passed, she connected with a brother in Poland she never knew existed. He shared that their father was a virtuoso violinist and a singer, just like her.
And I feel that that's it. I don't need to look for anything else. It's done, because it's like a project of my life.
In her 70s, Millman finally knows her heritage and her history. Karen Lieberman, Global News, Toronto.
That is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Pitamamkek National Park Reserve, Prince Edward Island.
Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz. Jeff Bennett is away. On the NewsHour tonight, President Biden acknowledges mistakes in last week's debate, but insists he will stay in the race for the White House. We report live from London as exit polls in the United Kingdom show voters likely elected a center-left Labour government after 14 years of center-right Conservative rule. And a look back at a Supreme Court term full of consequential and controversial decisions.
This court seems to be very comfortable with the president himself exercising an awful lot of power, perhaps not being as accountable as the founders would have wanted him to be.
Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour and happy Independence Day. Well, it's been 1 week since President Joe Biden's poor performance in the first debate of the 2024 campaign caused a political shockwave. The president insists he is staying in the race. But even on this 4th of July holiday, concerns continue to grow inside the Democratic Party about whether Mr. Biden is the best person to sit atop the ticket in November. NewsHour political correspondent Lisa Desjardins has been talking to lawmakers and to voters. She joins me now with the latest. Good to see you, Lisa. Hi. So in the day's other headlines, Hurricane Beryl is now a Category 2 storm, down from a Category 5, but it remains powerful as it churns towards Mexico. At least 9 people have been killed across the region. In Jamaica, Beryl knocked down trees and power lines as it brushed the island's southern coast. And in the eastern Caribbean, 95% of homes on a pair of islands in St. Vincent and the Grenadines have been damaged or destroyed. While in Barbados, boats were tossed like toys. Sailors say there's likely even more destruction beneath the surf.
All the vessels in here have damage. All have damage. Structural damage, but we got a good few vessels that is on the water. We don't know how much the total is right now, but we estimate about 30 or maybe 40 vessels on the lake.
The National Hurricane Center expects Beryl to weaken further, but to remain a dangerous hurricane until it reaches Mexico's shores tomorrow. Southern Texas is forecast to see impacts from Beryl early next week. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told President Biden today that he's sending a delegation to renew ceasefire talks with Hamas. The two spoke by phone after Hamas sent a response to a 3-phase proposal pushed by the U.S., Israel, and other nations. In the meantime, northern Israeli hillsides are ablaze amid heavy rocket fire from Hezbollah in Lebanon. The group says it's launched hundreds of projectiles in response to Israel's killing of one of its top commanders. At the funeral for Mohammed Nameh Nasser today in Beirut, a Hezbollah leader vowed that the retaliation will continue.
The response to the assassination of our dear leader Abu Nameh began last night, and quickly. This series of responses is targeting new sites the enemy never imagined would be hit.
Israel has not reported any casualties. The Israeli Defense Forces say it struck back today, hitting Hezbollah military structures in southern Lebanon. Russian President Vladimir Putin ruled out a ceasefire in Ukraine until Kyiv takes steps that are, quote, irreversible and acceptable to the Russian Federation. Putin made the comment in Kazakhstan on the final day of a regional security conference. He also weighed in on the U.S. election, particularly former President Trump's repeated claims that if re-elected, he could end the fighting in Ukraine in a single day.
The fact that Mr. Trump declares that he is ready and wants to stop the war in Ukraine, we take this quite seriously. I am not, of course, familiar with his possible proposals regarding how he is going to do this, but I have no doubt that he means it sincerely, and we will support it.
In the meantime, Ukraine's military said its troops retreated from the outskirts of Chasiv Yar, it's a town in the eastern Donetsk region. Commanders say Russia has deployed scorched earth tactics there for months. Its fall would put nearby cities in jeopardy and threaten critical Ukrainian supply routes. A court in Moscow convicted U.S. citizen Robert Woodland of drug-related charges today. He was sentenced to 12.5 years in prison. Woodland, who was born in Russia, was in court today to hear his sentence. He's one of a growing number of Americans arrested in Russia as relations between the two nations sink to Cold War lows. His lawyers say Woodland has been suffering from unspecified mental health issues. They plan to appeal the verdict. The International Swimming Federation says its executive director has been ordered to testify in a U.S. criminal probe into alleged doping by Chinese Olympic swimmers. American officials want to know how 23 Chinese swimmers were allowed to compete in the 2021 Tokyo Olympics despite testing positive for a banned heart medication. It comes just 3 weeks ahead of the Olympic Games in Paris, where 11 of those same athletes are set to compete. Millions across America have been celebrating the July 4th holiday, and it's been a hot one. 134 million people in the South and in the West have been under heat alerts. That didn't stop the celebrations, of course, with parades and cookouts across the nation. On New York's Coney Island, the Nathan's hot dog eating contest gobbled on today without 16-time champion Joey Chestnut, who couldn't compete because of a sponsorship conflict. Instead, Patrick Bertoletti of Chicago took the men's title, downing 58 dogs in 10 minutes. And defending women's champion Miki Sudo retained her crown, eating a women's record of 51 francs. And for all of you salad eaters out there, here's a fun fact. This July 4th also happens to be the 100th birthday of the Caesar salad. The culinary staple has its roots not in America, but in Tijuana, Mexico. That is where, in 1924, an Italian immigrant named Cesar Cardini is said to have thrown together some leftover ingredients after his hungry patrons emptied the shelves. The result was the dish that we know and love today. So, something for everyone this July 4th. Still to come on the News Hour. Billions of dollars in federal pandemic aid for schools help students catch up academically, but gaps remain. A look at an effort underway in Missouri to enshrine abortion access in the state's constitution, and the climate cost of artificial intelligence and the energy required to power it.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Exit polls in the United Kingdom show a Labour landslide in today's election, with the centre-left party winning a massive majority in Parliament in the first general election in nearly 5 years. This video from Sky TV shows the results of those exit polls. The Conservatives' loss marks the end of 14 years in power and Rishi Sunak's prime ministership. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer will be Britain's next prime minister. NewsHour special correspondent Malcolm Brabant is in London covering the election and joins us now. So Malcolm, what more can you tell us about these results? Were they...
Tonight, President Biden vows to stay in the race as pressure builds for him to step aside, today admitting he screwed up at that debate. And Hurricane Beryl storms through the Caribbean on a path that could take it to Texas. First tonight, President Biden under growing pressure to prove to his party that he can beat Donald Trump, admitting in a new radio interview that he screwed up in last week's debate, ahead of tomorrow's one-on-one exclusive with ABC's George Stephanopoulos. Now at least 3 Democrats calling on the president to step aside. And what we're learning about what he told governors at the White House, how he needs sleep, and that he plans to end events earlier as the campaign kicks into high gear. Slid Wang at the White House. Hurricane Beryl taking aim at Mexico and possibly the Texas coast. Preparations already underway after the Cayman Islands and Jamaica took a beating. The most powerful hurricane in Jamaica in 15 years. Desperate tourists at the airport hoping to get out. Nathan Bube reporting tonight from Jamaica. Back here at home, the record-breaking heat wave, more than half the country. More than 200 million Americans are under heat alerts from coast to coast as firefighters struggle to contain at least 7 major fires burning in the West and the warnings from officials this holiday. Early exit polls are in from the UK's closely watched election. James Longman with what looks to be a seismic shift for a major U.S. ally. Major cities celebrate the 4th of July under heightened security. Thousands of officers on duty here in New York ahead of the Macy's fireworks display. Aaron Katursky with late reporting. Tensions escalate between Israel and Hezbollah. Hundreds of rockets fired into Israel after the assassination of a militant leader in Lebanon. Could it be a preview of what's to come? Matt Gutman tonight from Tel Aviv. Beachgoers beware. A man is rushed to the hospital after an apparent shark attack in Texas. And America Strong tonight. A heartwarming and patriotic reunion. 2 military dogs, 2 Marines celebrate their future together.
From ABC News.
Tonight, the critical hours for President Biden as the race to do debate damage control intensifies. The president today acknowledging I screwed up, and our new reporting he's privately torn between acceptance and defiance in the face of calls to withdraw. Now saying, according to sources, he wants to get more rest, and revealing he saw a doctor after the debate, even after the White House said that wasn't the case. Former President Trump now weighing in. Also tonight, the huge wildfire in California. Tens of thousands evacuated from their homes. July 4th festivities canceled, all during a dangerous heat wave. More than 140 million Americans under alerts tonight. Hurricane Beryl's path of destruction, ripping up parts of Jamaica, now taking aim at Mexico. So is Texas next? We're tracking it live. The latest on law enforcement on high alert at holiday celebrations across the country. And the news just coming in. 2 confirmed shark attacks, one in Florida, another in Texas. The phone call between President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Is there optimism for a potential ceasefire? We've got the new reporting. The FBI now investigating Chinese Olympic swimmers who failed doping tests and who are set to compete in Paris just 3 weeks from now. And those July 4th holiday sales, what experts say is really a deal now and what's worth waiting for.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, I'm Hallie.
President Biden's border crisis taking a toll across the country with a series of migrant arrests in high-profile cases. Just this week, an ICE source confirmed a DUI suspect in Albuquerque entered the U.S. illegally. He is now accused of running a red light and killing a 22-year-old man. And here in New York City, ICE arrested an MS-13 gang member wanted for murder in El Salvador. Authorities say he also crossed into the U.S. illegally. And we are getting new heinous details in the Houston murder of 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungare. As her family confirms, Jocelyn was indeed sexually assaulted before being killed. The 2 suspects, by the way, also illegal immigrants. Republicans warn this sort of crime could happen anywhere.
we're seeing so many angel families now popping up and being created. Angel families being folks that are victims of crimes committed by illegals around the country. And there's more to come. If people think that this is it, it's one and done, they are sadly mistaken. This is happening in every single community around the country. Every state, every town in America is a border town, thanks to Joe Biden.
Joining us now is New York Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, member of the House Ways and Means Committee. When I interviewed Kat Kamek yesterday, she just made such a great point that we just re-aired there in the fact that every single town is a border town in this country. Now, remember, if you were to back up, and obviously the border patrol crisis has actually been an issue for over decades, but every border town is in New York City, is in Texas, not only Texas and Arizona, but in Los Angeles. Because why? This administration has opened our borders and they've been allowed to just spread all over the country freely. And therefore now these democratic cities are paying the price.
Exactly. And what's equally as bad, Julia, is the states like New York, which have laws like the Green Light Law, which actually gives licenses to illegal immigrants and also a special status so that our police cannot share with ICE, with other Customs and Border Protection agents as to the status of these people. It's exactly why Laken Riley was murdered, because New York City police had to let the murderer go, even though they had suspected that he had ties to a gang, illegal gang. He also had ties to crimes, and they had to let him go, and he went and killed Laken Riley, an innocent student down in Georgia. That's why every state is a border state, and I represent the northern border of New York State. 85% of the people on the terror watch list, according to the Border Patrol, is coming across the northern border because New York's laws are so lenient, and because New York State does not impose any restrictions on these people. And you end up having the cartels saying, "Oh, this is a better option. Let's go to New York and get closer to New York City, where they can pretty much live, without unanimity, without anyone finding out who they are. They can just kind of go into the seams and nobody finds them." And this is a real problem, and it's not just New York City; it is everywhere. It's upstate New York. We just had a horrible tragedy in Albany, another killing by illegal immigrants. We've had all kinds of we're seeing rapes and murders and the worst kind of crimes against children, which I can't think of anything worse at this point.
And these are repeat offenders. And the reason they're repeat offenders is because our law enforcement isn't allowed to keep them in jail. So they're actually going out, they're committing these crimes, spending a couple hours behind bars, being let out on nothing for bail, and then reoffending. I mean, this is like the land of the free for criminals. And you can just come to the United States and commit crimes, not pay and not do the time. And there's no accountability whatsoever. Although the administration is now, believe it or not, after all of that, now in the final year of his administration, doing a victory lap, saying that after 3 weeks, President Biden's border executive action appears to be working. So June numbers did hit a 3-year low. But what about the millions here already, including, these gang members that are reoccurring and killing and maiming and murdering and attacking children? I mean, what are they doing about that?
Yeah, well, I'm talking about the gang members, the murders, rape. These people are coming across. Remember, President Trump famously said that they're not sending their best. They're sending everyone they can, and it's not them. It's not the countries that are doing this. It is the cartels. They are finding a way to human traffic people and murderers and anyone who wants to come to our country get to come in. And we're so overstressing the system. The Customs and Border agents do not have the resources to keep our border safe, and that's what you're seeing. ICE, they can't control it. All we needed to do was to, at least at the very minimum, is go back to remain in Mexico and stop catch and release. 2 things that President Trump did that did the most to secure our border. 2 things that Joe Biden erased on day one, and that's why you're seeing this record number of people coming across. And Julie, it is terrible, not just from a security standpoint. The cost is unbelievable, hundreds of billions of dollars across the nation, and now we're seeing billions of dollars to New York taxpayers alone to take care of illegal immigrants, and whether it's their housing, everything. It's just not prioritizing American citizens and people here lawfully. And the other thing is, we have millions of people waiting to come here lawfully. Why are we allowing these people to come here and be trafficked? Why are we allowing the gangs to actually have operational control of our border? We aren't a country if we...
Breaking tonight, all signs point to a dramatic power shift in the UK. It looks like voters will hand Labour a landslide victory, ending 14 years of Conservative rule. We're in London on what's poised to be a historic election night. Mexico braces for Hurricane Beryl as the monster storm turns closer. And how Ozempic is changing what people eat.
It completely eliminated any snacking.
And what snack companies are serving up.
From CBC News, this is The National with Asha Tomlinson.
Thanks for joining us. Adrian is away. A political shockwave is moving through.
This is the hottest I've ever seen it. Tonight, the record-breaking heat baking Americans, with half the country under heat alerts.
What we're going to see over the next 7 days rivals some of our biggest heat waves that we've ever experienced.
The heat adding fuel to dangerous wildfires across California. Texas is one of more than 25 states facing excessive heat warnings and advisories. In California, the warnings are particularly stark. The National Weather Service calls the heat wave dangerous and potentially lethal. And firefighters are working in those triple-digit conditions as they battle flames. CBS's Elise Preston is on the scene in Oroville, 70 miles north of Sacramento.
Much of the West Coast is facing two threats: dangerous fire conditions and brutal heat.
Anywhere from the 115 to 120 degrees, so that's incredibly hot.
The National Weather Service calls this an exceptionally dangerous, potentially historic, and deadly heat event. The massive wildfire burning near the town of Oroville, California, has consumed at least 4 structures. But there's another toll. 8 firefighters here have suffered heat-related injuries.
Standing outside here in this heat, how does it feel to you?
If you were to put on all your winter gear to go skiing in 110 degrees and go do...
Possible shark sighting forced the closure of a popular maritime beach for some time today. The predator was spotted in the waters of Rissard Beach on Nova Scotia's South Shore. CTV's Stephanie Seacos joins us in the newsroom. And Steph, you got a few more details about this?
Todd, the suspected sighting happened around 10:30 this morning on a busy summer day. The water was cleared for about 2 hours while lifeguards watched for any more sightings. People were able to resume swimming around 1 o'clock. While it's unclear what type of shark may have been spotted, white sharks have been seen around the South Shore in the past.
I don't think people should be concerned that there's a shark in the water in the sense that they can't go back to that beach. Because the data that we're getting from a lot of at least the white sharks here, which are really the only one that can pose a danger to humans, is that they're moving through. They don't tend to stay in one area for a long period of time unless there's a food source there.
Neil Hammerschlag with the Shark Research Foundation and Atlantic Shark Expedition says between August and October of last year, 36 different white sharks were identified during expeditions off the South Shore. This is believed to be the second sighting in recent weeks. Last week, a basking shark was spotted along the eastern shore. Todd.
All right, thank you, Steph, in the newsroom with us. And Stephanie has your late news update here after the National.
I'm Rochelle Harrison-Pless in Sydney. Whether it's an environmental story, business feature or breaking news, I report on the stories that matter from across Australia and New Zealand here on France 24.
Rochelle Harrison-Pless, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
Hello and welcome to Daybreak here on France 24. These are this morning's main news headlines. Labour landslide. Keir Starmer says the UK is ready for change as exit polls point to a massive win for his party. It's expected to take over 400 seats, with Conservatives trailing far behind at just over 130. Turnout in the first round was at a record low. Voters in Iran head to the polls this Friday for a runoff vote in presidential elections there, pitting a reformist candidate against an ultra-conservative. And officials and locals in Mexico batten down the hatches ahead of the arrival of Hurricane Beryl. Good to have you with us. Well, the counting of votes is continuing, but the result isn't in question. Britain's Labour Party is headed for a landslide victory following Thursday's general election. Exit polls suggesting it's set to win a majority of 160 seats in Parliament as voters punish the governing Conservatives after 14 years of economic and political upheaval. Rishi Sunak has already conceded defeat. Labour leader Keir Starmer is now on course to be the country's next Prime Minister. He spoke earlier after being re-elected to a seat in North London.
I promise this, whether you voted for me or not, I will serve every person in this constituency. The mothers I sat with who've lost children to knife crime, the pensioners who can't get the doctor's appointments they desperately need, the local businesses who've struggled so hard to keep their head above water. I will speak out for you, have your back, fight your corner every single day. Because tonight people here and around the country have spoken, and they're ready for change, to end the politics of performance and return to politics as public service. But change begins right here, because this is your democracy, your community and your future. You have voted. It is now time for us to deliver. Thank you very much.
As we heard there, Labour leader Keir Starmer saying the UK is ready for change. Well, with more on what the party pledged to the electorate during the election campaign, here's Clemens Fry.
Labour is set to win, on track to win, a landslide majority of 170. That is the prediction of a usually very accurate exit poll being given by the British media. If the forecast is indeed accurate, then Sir Keir Starmer will become Prime Minister with 410 Labour MPs. That is just short of the majority that Tony Blair got back in 1997. The Conservatives have slumped as predicted, and they are predicted to get just 131 MPs, their lowest number ever. As for the Liberal Democrats, they've done well, according to the exit poll. They are projected to come third with 61 MPs. The Scottish National Party, well, that's been a bruising night for them. They will see, it seems, their number of MPs fall to just 10. And a new entrant on the political scene, Reform UK, is forecast to get 13 MPs, according to this exit poll. Will Nigel Farage, their leader, be one of them? Anyway, it's going to be a very busy day with Keir Starmer becoming Prime Minister, that he will be asked to form a government by the King, the head of state, at Buckingham Palace. But before that, it will be Rishi Sunak who will tender his resignation to King Charles. So a very busy day on the cards, and Friday afternoon we should know probably the Defence Secretary, the Home Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, that is the Finance Minister.
Our London correspondent Benedict Pavio there. Well, with more on what Labour pledged during its election campaign, here's Glenn Valor.
And I know that if we're going to do a country that needs to be rebuilt from the top down. That's the challenge facing the new incoming government. Labour faces two problems of both reviving an anemic economy and battling a cost of living crisis. As a result, sustained economic growth will be a top priority for its government. To achieve it, Labour intends to establish a national wealth fund which aims to provide both public and private investment to support growth and clean energy. Furthermore, they pledge not to raise income tax, national insurance, or value-added tax. Healthcare has also been a key issue on the ballot. Under 14 years of Conservative rule, the National Health Service endured several crises, including severe budget cuts, salary cuts for medical professionals, and a pandemic. There are 7.6 million people on waiting lists for hospital treatment in England, 3 times the 2010 figure. Labour plans to cut waiting times in the NHS by adding 40,000 more appointments every week, double the number of diagnostic cancer scanners, and train thousands more family doctors. When the Tories launched Brexit, their key pledge was regaining control over immigration. However, since the bitter divorce from the EU, the country has seen a surge in new arrivals. In 2022, net migration was around twice the level it was before Brexit at 606,000, according to the UK Office for National Statistics. Labour has pledged to reduce that figure. It wants to reform Britain's point-based immigration system by bringing in restrictions on visas and by training workers where there are domestic shortages. For illegal immigration, it plans to scrap the current government's plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda and focus on stopping people smuggling gangs and beefing up border security. And finally, climate and clean energy also high on the Labour priority list. On the programme, clean power to be achieved by 2030 via doubling onshore wind, tripling solar power, and quadrupling offshore wind. Labour has said it will maintain a strategic reserve of gas power stations to guarantee security of supply, but that no new licenses for oil and gas fields in the North Sea will be issued. It will also look at securing the nuclear power sector.
Conservatives are facing their worst election result in modern history, with cabinet ministers among those losing their seats. It's likely to prompt a contest to replace Tory leader and outgoing Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. He has already conceded defeat and says he takes full responsibility for the party's performance. Well, with more on its legacy, here's Nkat Leotadi.
It was one of the core pledges from the Conservative Party before they took the reins at Downing Street in 2010. Cutting NHS waiting lists. But after 14 years at the helm, the backlog is bigger than ever. There are now more than 7.5 million people waiting for non-urgent treatments. It's nearly 3 times the amount when the Tories assumed power. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has admitted his party has failed.
There is a challenge in the NHS, and one of the areas we haven't made as much progress as I would have liked is on tackling NHS waiting lists.
Net migration, the difference between the number of people coming to live in the UK and those leaving, has also surged since 2010. When he was in office, David Cameron promised to slash numbers down from 252,000 to the tens of thousands per year. But the number has now more than doubled to 686,000. It's still lower than the record 764,000 seen in 2022, despite a post-Brexit exodus of EU nationals. Those statistics do not include an increase in asylum seekers, fueled by the record number of migrants crossing the channel in small boats. Food banks, which were rare in the UK in the early 2000s, now outnumber hospitals. The distribution of food parcels ramped up from 61,000 in 2010 to 2011 to now totaling 3.1 million in the past year. The Tories have delivered on their promise to British voters to cut unemployment. Joblessness has been low over the past 14 years, falling from 7.8% in 2010 to 4.4% in March to April of this year. Labour argues the figures mask the increasing number of people on zero-hour contracts and low-paid jobs. Something else that has taken a dip, but this time unwanted, is funding for local authorities. It dropped by 40% between 2010 and 2020. The slump has had a major knock-on effect on public services. Almost a fifth of libraries nationwide shut their doors in the first decade of Tory rule. The Conservatives say the cuts are part of a policy of slashing public spending in a bid to reduce the budget deficit.
In other world news, the ballot comes amid heightened regional tensions over the war in Gaza, a dispute with the West over Tehran's nuclear program, and popular discontent over the state of the country's sanctions-hit economy. Following a record low turnout in the first round, Iran is this Friday holding a presidential election runoff vote between reformist Masoud Pezeshkian and ultra-conservative Saeed Jalili. With more, here's Sophie Lamont.
It's his final political rally before Friday's vote, and he's welcomed by crowds of people. Masoud Pezeshkian is greeting his supporters who've turned out in their thousands at the Tehran Stadium. Among them, many young people hoping that the reformist candidate will bring Iran out of isolation.
I promise you that I will do my best to solve the internal problems. We can manage the country with unity and cohesion.
Initially trained as a surgeon, the moderate, pro-Western 69-year-old candidate favors social and political openness. He says he aims to kickstart international talks on the Iranian nuclear issue at a standstill since the withdrawal of the US in 2018. Pezeshkian came out on top in the first round of these elections, followed by Saeed Jalili. His main opponent, 58, chose this mosque as the last leg of his campaign before Friday's vote. The ultra-conservative candidate advocates for a stricter policy towards the West and accuses his rival of wanting to negotiate with the enemy.
We will defend the nation's interests with strength. We will rise up against corruption and foreign pressures. We will never allow anyone to weaken the power of our nation.
Saeed Jalili is the preferred candidate of Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who's the real head of state. Voter turnout is expected to be a determining factor in these elections. In the first round, it reached a historic low of 40%, showing just how disillusioned Iranians have grown with politics.
There is renewed optimism over a possible breakthrough as mediators continue to try to reach a ceasefire deal for Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened his security cabinet for talks late on Thursday to discuss new Hamas proposals sent through Qatari and Egyptian mediators. Israel believes dozens of hostages are still alive in Gaza, and with the war taking an increasing human toll in the devastated Palestinian territory, both sides face mounting international pressure to reach an agreement. With the latest, here's Nicholas Rushworth.
Protesters march and chant slogans calling for the release of hostages. One possible step towards that is a decision by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to send a delegation to Qatar to resume stalled negotiations on a hostage release deal with Hamas, this after new Hamas proposals. Netanyahu briefed Washington in a phone call. The White House expressed hope there could be a breakthrough, saying the president welcomed the Prime Minister's decision to authorize his negotiators to engage with US, Qatari and Egyptian mediators in an effort to close out the deal. The head of Mossad, Israeli intelligence, is leading the delegation to meet mediators who have spent months trying to get Israel and Hamas to seek a negotiated solution. Hamas has long demanded an end to the war and an Israeli withdrawal as a prelude to a deal. Netanyahu has repeatedly vowed the Gaza campaign will not end till Hamas's military and government capabilities have been destroyed. Washington announced a pathway to a truce deal in May, which it said had been proposed by Israel. It included a 6-week truce to allow for talks, the release of hostages, and eventually a program to rebuild Gaza.
Hurricane Beryl has strengthened back into a Category 3 storm as it barrels towards Mexico after leaving a trail of destruction across the eastern Caribbean. It's currently packing winds of up to 185 kilometers an hour, but is expected to weaken again before making landfall in Mexico. Officials there have been preparing shelters, boarding up windows, and evacuating some small outlying coastal communities ahead of the storm. Tourists are also taking precautions.
To make sure that our gas is shut off, to turn the gas off, to charge our power banks. The road will close at 4 p.m. and we were asked not to go outside, to board up the windows if we're high up, to make sure there's no flooding by making sure the drains are clear, and mostly to have enough food and water.
Families have already registered and they'll come back later. They are bringing dogs and cats. So far we only have 10 families.
In football news, hosts Germany are taking on Spain in the first of two blockbuster quarter-final ties at the European Championships later tonight. The winners will advance to a semi-final against either France or Portugal, who go head-to-head in Hamburg in the night's second heavyweight clash. France have managed to reach a sixth quarter-final in the last 7 major tournaments, despite not one of their players having scored in open play. With more from Germany, here's our sports reporter, Leo McGuinn.
France will face off against Portugal in a clash of the titans at Euro 2024. The quarter-final will take place here in Hamburg, behind me at the Volkspark Stadion. France have kind of stumbled into the quarter-finals. They had a disappointing group stage, drawing twice and securing one narrow victory, and it took a late own goal for them to get past Belgium in the last 16. There have been many questions asked about their attacking woes and how to get the best out of Kylian Mbappe, captain Kylian Mbappe. France have scored only 3 times at this tournament, 2 own goals and 1 penalty. At a press conference, Kylian Mbappe was asked why he no longer plays the way he used to for Le Bleu. He no longer makes those trademark runs in behind. He said it was simply a question of adapting. He also added that they really miss midfielder Paul Pogba and his creativity. There's been a lot of chatter around team selection. Many have called the veteran striker Olivier Giroud to come back into the side. The 37-year-old is Les Bleus' all-time top goal scorer, but he's played only 45 minutes at the tournament so far, so perhaps he's the answer to France's goal-scoring woes. There'll be at least one change to France's starting lineup. We know that midfielder Adrien Rabiot is suspended. Eduardo Camavinga looks like the favourite to come in there. For Portugal, it's been a rather strange tournament. They started incredibly strongly, winning twice their first 2 games in the group stage before suffering a shock defeat to Georgia. They then needed penalties to edge past Slovenia in the last 16. All eyes will once again be on captain Cristiano Ronaldo. The 39-year-old has yet to score so far at this tournament. In fact, he missed a penalty in that clash against Slovenia. These two sides have a very famous history. The last time they played was in the group stage at Euro 2020. That ended in a 2-2 draw. In fact, Ronaldo scored twice that day. And everyone will remember the Euro 2016 final, which saw Portugal shock France, beating them 1-0 to claim their first ever international trophy. Les Bleus will be hoping to avoid a repeat of that. This time out, the winners of this one will face either Spain or Germany in the semi-finals.
Countdown is well and truly underway. We're just 3 weeks from the Olympics opening ceremony here in Paris. Our correspondents in Tunisia have been catching up with some of the athletes who've been training at home before leaving for France. The country is sending 23 competitors, the sports to watch for Tunisian supporters: wrestling and taekwondo.
The countdown to the Paris Games started long ago for these taekwondo athletes who are training in the sports complex in Tunis. One favorite is Mohamed Khalil Jandoubi, who brought home a silver medal from the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. His example inspired a whole new generation, like Firas Katousi, the current world champion in the men's under 80 kilo class.
Thanks to Khalil's win in Tokyo, people know taekwondo more, are following it more. People send us messages, encourage us. People are waiting to watch the competition.
In the Dodang, the training hall, is Ikram Dahri, 27. This will be her first Olympics ever.
It's a bit stressful. Sure, there's stress in any competition, but the whole world will be watching this competition. It's not just any ordinary competition. So I'm trying to prepare mentally, most of all, and also physically, of course.
In an adjacent room, the female and male teams for Greco-Roman wrestling and freestyle wrestling practice falls and arm holds. Training side by side is an advantage for Siwar Boussetta, who qualified for the Olympics.
Men are stronger than women, so we take that strength, and when we wrestle with women, I feel it's much easier.
2 men and 2 women wrestlers will fly to Paris. They're dreaming of a podium finish like their role model, Marwa Amri. The coach of the women's team is the first Tunisian and Arab woman to have won a medal in freestyle wrestling at the 2016 Olympics in Rio.
Wrestling was seen badly, because people think that women who wrestle are aggressive. But really now the mentality has changed a lot. Why? Because there's a lot of women, and it spread not just in Tunisia. It spread to other Arab countries too.
In the run-up to Paris at the beginning of July, these athletes are counting on a lot more concentration and solidarity to get them ready.
Let's take another look at our top story this hour. Labour landslide. Keir Starmer says the What's time now for?
We want to set up a support for them.
Watch Dead Alone in Singapore on demand at cna.asia.
This is Asia Now.
Good afternoon. It's 12 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 9:30 in New Delhi, and it is 11 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Theresa Tang. At this hour, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak concedes defeat, saying the opposition Labour Party has won the election. He says he's congratulated Keir Starmer and takes responsibility for the loss. Police in northern India arrest 6 people in connection with the deadly stampede at a religious event. The suspects, who organized the Hindu prayer meeting, fled when the chaos broke out.
I'm Rebecca London, coming to you live from Patras in Uttar Pradesh, where that tragedy unfolded on Tuesday. The incident has sparked outrage in India and raised questions about the lack of safety measures for large gatherings.
Also coming up, Jemaah Islamiyah, the Southeast Asian terror outfit behind the 2002 Bali bombings, disbands. Its senior figures say they are ready to abide by the law. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has conceded defeat to the opposition Labour Party.
From the hands of wildlife traffickers in Lebanon to the safety of a South African sanctuary. This is Freya, a 6-month-old lion cub after her arrival at the Drankenstein Lion Park. She's been given lifetime sanctuary at Drankenstein, which has taken in other lions from zoos and circuses in France, Chile, Romania and elsewhere. Some have terrible backstories of abuse. Freya's settlement at Drankenstein, however, means she'll never live as a lion in the wild. South Africa, with an admirable reputation for conservation and ethical sanctuaries like Drankenstein, also has a thriving captive lion business where the big cats are bred for petting and other encounters. Animal welfare groups say the policy goes against the principles of conservation and have called on authorities to end the business of breeding lions in captivity.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin meeting his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in a show of deepening cooperation between the two countries. It was the second time in as many months that they've met, this time on Wednesday at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Kazakhstan. The SCO is an international group founded to counter Western influence. Russian-Chinese relations of comprehensive partnership and strategic interaction are experiencing the best period in their history. They built on the principles of equality, mutual benefit and respect for each other's sovereignty. Our cooperation is not directed against anyone. We do not create any blocs or alliances. We simply act in the interests of our people. The Russian leader held a series of bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the gathering, saying the close partnership seeks to promote a more multipolar world. Xi, describing Putin as an old friend, urged regional leaders to resist external interference.
Kenyan police officers equipped with body armor and armed with automatic weapons were observed conducting patrols in the streets of the Haitian capital on Wednesday. Haiti's Prime Minister Gary Conille told the Security Council on Wednesday that he welcomed the implementation of the multinational security support mission. Haiti is currently at a critical point with 12,000 armed individuals holding a population of 12 million hostage. At this decisive junction, no project, be it economic or political, can be tackled without addressing the security issue. For that reason, my government welcomed the implementation of the commitments made in Resolution 2699 regarding the multinational security support mission. The deployment of the first contingent of police officers alongside the Haitian law enforcement agencies should help put a stop to the barbarity of criminal groups. Hundreds of Kenyan police officers arrived in Haiti on June 25th as part of the multinational security support mission to help release the country from the tight hold of armed criminal gangs.
25 soldiers in the Democratic Republic of Congo have been sentenced to death. A military court in North Kivu on Wednesday found them guilty of theft, fleeing the army and violating orders, among other charges. The army has been fighting the Rwanda-backed M23 insurgency in the region for more than 2 years, as well as facing violence from other militia. 27 soldiers were detained on Tuesday, together with 4 of their civilian wives, who'd allegedly received goods stolen from nearby shops. One soldier was handed a 10-year prison sentence, while the 4 wives and another soldier were acquitted. All but one of the 25 denied the charges. Their lawyer says he will appeal the verdict. Faced with the ongoing security crisis in the east, the DRC's army has become increasingly dysfunctional, with soldiers inadequately equipped and morale low.
The Council of the Arab League has tasked its group at the UN with studying steps to freeze Israel's participation in the party's General Assembly. The bloc, which held an extraordinary session in Cairo Thursday, said Israel failed to adhere to the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. The Palestinian representative welcomed the move. Today, the Arab League Council at the level of permanent representatives has decided clearly to start the procedures of freezing Israel's participation in the United Nations General Assembly as a colonial power, a power that firstly threatens international peace and security and doesn't commit to the United Nations Charter, nor did it fulfill the terms of its membership in the UN. Today, the Arab League Council has assigned the Arab group in New York with starting these procedures to freeze Israel's participation in the General Assembly. And we want to remind that this step, a step like this one, is what ended, brought down and eliminated the colonial regime in South Africa. The UN General Assembly, under the chairpersonship of the Algerian Foreign Minister in 1974, refused to recognize the credentials of the South African delegation, a blow to the apartheid regime. Over 38,000 Palestinians have been killed in 9 months of war.
It gave us a model to share Australia-wide.
Maggie Beer's Big Mission.
Lives are at stake.
Starts Tuesday 8:30 on ABC TV and ABC iView.
Today, Labour landslide. UK opposition leader Keir Starmer set to be Britain's new Prime Minister after wiping out Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party at the polls.
You voted for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now.
Also ahead, community outrage after Queensland police invite children to play in a marked event.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Goodman. Have a good life.